They say a man's worth is measured by how he loves his family. I believe that. Still do, in some buried, cracked corner of my chest. I was never anything special growing up, just a regular kid from Ohio. I wasn't the best at sports, never had straight A's, and when I did get noticed, it was usually because I'd done something clumsy or awkward. But I had a work ethic drilled into me like a sacred code. My dad used to say, "You might not be the smartest man in the room, but you better be the hardest working." So I became that man. I worked. I built. I provided. For 10 years, I punched the clock at the factory. 10-hour shifts in steel-toed boots, grime caked in my fingerprints like a second skin. My hands always smelled faintly of oil, no matter how much soap I used. I didn't mind. That was the smell of food on the table, of a mortgage paid on time, of a refrigerator humming with cold air and groceries. And I did it all for her, Emily. My wife. My everything. We met when I was 23. She was 21, with honey blonde hair that caught the sunlight just right, and a laugh that made me feel like I was hearing music for the first time. I didn't think someone like her would ever look at someone like me. But she did. And before I knew it, we were married, standing under an archway of hydrangeas in her grandmother's backyard. I wore a suit I could barely afford. She wore a smile I'll never forget. We moved into a modest house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it had a fenced-in yard and a big front window that Emily liked to decorate every season. I paid the bills. She made it a home. At least, that's what I thought. Over the years, things got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. She started sighing when I came home late from work. She complained I never surprised her anymore. And always, she joked to her friends, "He never buys me flowers." Can you believe that? Married 10 years, and not once has he brought me roses. She said it with a laugh, but there was something else under her tone. Something sharp. Like a thorn. So I decided to change that. It was a Tuesday, nothing special. I'd worked an extra shift over the weekend, and for once I had a little cash in my wallet that wasn't already spoken for. The thought came to me while I was walking home, and I turned right instead of left, straight into McGrady's flower shop. It's a little corner place with wind chimes hanging from the door and a bell that jingles when you enter. The guy behind the counter, I'd seen him before. Younger than me. Longish hair, hipster type, too many rings on his fingers. He gave me this lazy smile like he knew something I didn't. I told him I wanted 101 roses. Red ones. Fresh. Big spender, he said with a grin. It's for my wife, I replied, feeling a strange pride swell in my chest. She says I never buy her flowers. He nodded, like he understood women. Like he was some sort of expert. I didn't care. I handed over $200 in crumpled bills, and he wrapped the bouquet in brown paper and tied it with a silky ribbon. The stems were cool in my hands. I remember thinking how heavy 101 roses could feel. I walked home carrying that bouquet like it was the Holy Grail. I imagined the look on Emily's face. Her lips parting in surprise. Her hand going to her chest. Maybe even a tear or two forming in the corners of her big brown eyes. It had been a long time since I'd seen her cry over anything that wasn't a TV show or a Facebook video of a rescued dog. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway as I reached the house. Her car was parked in the same spot it always was, under the maple tree that had lost most of its leaves. The sun was already beginning to dip low, casting long shadows across the lawn. Porch light flicked on automatically. I smiled. This was it. This was the moment. I crept up the front steps quietly, wanting to make it a true surprise. I pictured her cooking dinner in the kitchen, maybe dancing to one of her playlists. She liked to play old Taylor Swift and pretend she was still 21. I didn't mind. It was cute. She always twirled when she stirred the sauce. I turned the knob slowly. I hadn't even locked the door this morning, just like always. We live in a safe neighborhood. Safe enough that I thought I knew what I was coming home to. But as soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. No music. No clatter of pans. No TV murmuring in the background. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the faint hum of the fridge. Then I heard it. A laugh. Not Emily's laugh. Or if it was, it wasn't the one she used with me. This was different. Breathier. Sharper. I stood frozen in the entryway, the roses still in my hands, their fragrance suddenly too sweet, almost sickening. My heart started pounding. I heard footsteps. The soft thud of bare feet on tile. A moan. And then, her voice. Low. Urging. Giggling like a teenager. I moved down the hall with slow, heavy steps, each one like a drumbeat in my ears. My hands clenched the bouquet tighter, thorns pressing into my palms through the brown paper. I stepped past the photos on the wall, our wedding day, our trip to iZHPIL, our first Christmas in this house. A life in frames. Lies in glass. I turned the corner into the kitchen. And that's when I saw them. Emily, bent forward over the counter, still wearing the tank top I'd bought her last Christmas, the one with little cherries on it. And the flower shop clerk, that same smug bastard, standing behind her, shirtless, pants halfway down, his hands on her hips like he owned her. Like I never existed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat locked up. They hadn't seen me yet. They were too wrapped up in each other, too deep in whatever fantasy they were playing out in the very kitchen where I'd made her dinner, where I'd kissed her neck while she cut vegetables, where I'd once gotten on one knee again just to see her smile. The roses dropped from my hands. The thud was soft, but it was enough. Emily turned her head. And that's when our eyes met. For a split second, the world went silent. Her face twisted in confusion, then horror, then something else. Guilt? No. Worse. Annoyance. Like I was the one intruding. Jason, she breathed, scrambling to pull her tank top down. What are you doing home? I stared at her. Then at him. Whoa, man. This isn't what it looks like, the clerk said, fumbling to pull up his pants, his voice trembling slightly but not nearly enough for my liking. He was younger. Slimmer. Probably still thought he was invincible. His hair was damp with sweat and stuck to his forehead like seaweed. He looked more annoyed than scared. Maybe he thought I'd cry, or just leave. Maybe he thought I'd back down. Emily stood stiff, chest heaving, arms crossed over her tank top. Her eyes didn't plead or apologize. They stared through me, cold and sharp. A wall slammed down between us in that moment, a permanent barrier. She wasn't embarrassed. She was caught, sure. But sorry? Not even close. I glanced at the bouquet on the floor, roses scattered like fallen soldiers, some stems bent, a few crushed under the heel of her pink slipper. She must have stepped on them in the panic. Or maybe she didn't even notice. Or care. I bent down slowly and picked them up, carefully, like I was salvaging something sacred. A few petals drifted to the tile, soft and silent. Jason, Emily said again, quieter now. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. That made me laugh. It came out dry and humorless, but it was real. I couldn't stop it. Is there a way a man's supposed to find out his wife's screwing the guy who sold him the flowers he bought for her? Her mouth opened. Then closed. She looked at the clerk like maybe he'd have a line for her. Some slick defense. But he was backing away now, picking up his shirt, watching me like I was a wounded animal about to snap. I think you should leave, I said, not to her, to him. He blinked. What? Now? To my surprise, he didn't argue. Maybe he saw something in my eyes. Maybe he realized I wasn't going to punch him or scream or make a scene. I was too quiet. And quiet can be worse than rage. He grabbed his things and hurried past me, muttering something about being sorry, but I didn't care. The door slammed shut behind him. And then it was just me and Emily. She sat down at the table, arms folded, not even trying to explain. Not crying. Not groveling. Just waiting. Like she expected me to say something else. So I did. How long? She blinked slowly. A few months. I nodded. I'd expected as much. Why him? She shrugged, like it didn't even matter. He listened to me. He made me feel seen. Seen? I repeated. You come home covered in grease, exhausted, talking about bills and overtime and the guys at the plant. You barely notice me anymore. I took a breath, and it hitched in my throat. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't see the girl I married. I saw someone who had decided to stop loving me, and never bothered to tell me. Someone who thought she deserved better than a man who worked himself raw to give her everything. You ever think, I said slowly, that I was tired because I was out there breaking myself in half for you? For us? She looked down at the table. Maybe that was the problem. The words sliced deep, like paper cuts across my heart, thin but sharp and impossible to ignore. I stared at her for what felt like forever. And something inside me hardened. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to explain. That would have given her power she didn't deserve. I stood there, in the same kitchen where I'd made her Sunday pancakes, where we danced to Fleetwood Mac while she drank wine in her socks. And now it just felt dead. I'm gonna go for a drive, I said finally, gripping the ruined bouquet like it might keep me upright. Emily didn't argue. She didn't ask me to stay, didn't get up and follow. She just nodded once, slow, like she was agreeing with the end of a conversation that had really started months ago. Maybe even years. I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. Not slamming it. Not yelling. Just shutting it, like the last page of a book you don't want to read again. The night air hit me in the face, crisp and cold. My truck was parked down the street. I got in, started it up, and didn't look back at the house. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. I passed the gas station where I used to buy her Diet Cokes before she gave them up. I passed the elementary school we used to joke about sending our future kids to. And I passed McGrady's flower shop, the scene of the crime, in a way. The place where that skinny little clerk sold me the very weapon he used to humiliate me. I pulled over and stared at the dark storefront. The lights were off, but I could still see the "Open Daily" sign hanging crooked in the window. And right there on the glass, in that curly white paint they use for decoration, was a phrase. "Love, grown here." I laughed again. Same hollow sound as before. That was when the idea started to form. Not a violent idea. Not something stupid that would land me in a jail cell or in the hospital. No. What I wanted was better than that. I wanted them to feel something deeper than pain. Regret. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't throw punches. I'd take my time. I'd take everything. The next morning, I didn't go back to the house. I didn't answer her texts either, just 3 messages, short and cold. "We need to talk. Are you okay? You left your wallet." I let them sit unread. Let her wonder. Instead, I clocked into work and acted like nothing had changed. I nodded to the guys, ate my sandwich in silence, and stayed late. I needed the overtime. Not for her this time, for me. And when I left the plant, I didn't drive home. I drove to the courthouse and filed a few papers. Quietly. No fanfare. No dramatic speeches. Then I made one more stop, back at McGrady's. It was late, but the clerk, his name was Travis, I remembered now, was still there, counting the till, probably not expecting to see me ever again. His face turned pale when I walked in. I smiled. "Hey," I said calmly. "I've been thinking. I might want to buy more flowers." He hesitated, confused. Yeah?" "Yeah," I said, taking another step forward. "Like, a lot more. Bulk. For events. Maybe even weekly orders." His eyes flicked back and forth, clearly trying to read me. "You serious?" "Dead serious," I said, and my smile didn't fade. "I mean, sure. We do big orders sometimes." I looked around, casually. "Ever think about expanding? Doing partnerships? There's a ton of wedding planners in this town. Events. Graduation season coming up." Travis blinked. "What are you getting at?" I leaned on the counter. "Let's talk business." And just like that, I planted the first seed. Not for flowers. For revenge. Travis stared at me, hesitant. His jaw tightened just slightly, like he was weighing whether this was a trap or some weird form of forgiveness. It wasn't either. It was something else entirely. "Look," I said, keeping my voice easy, "you made a mistake. So did she. But I'm not here to throw hands or cry over it. Life moves on. And I've got a few ideas I think could help your shop." He blinked, clearly thrown off by how calm I was. I gave him a nod. "Give me 10 minutes. Then you decide." Travis slowly pushed aside the cash drawer and motioned to the back office. I followed him in, and we sat across from each other at a small desk cluttered with receipts and half-used rolls of floral tape. "I've got contacts," I began. "A friend runs an event supply business, linens, centerpieces, staging. His people are always looking for reliable florists. Big orders. Recurring ones. Real money." Travis rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, but why help me?" I smiled politely, folding my hands. "Because it benefits me too." He waited for me to explain. "I want a silent partnership," I said. 15% of your monthly profits in exchange for the business I bring in and advice when you need it. You get to keep the face of the shop. I stay out of sight. No drama. No complications. And you're okay with what happened?" he asked cautiously, eyes narrowing. "I'm not okay with it," I said truthfully. "But I'm not going to dwell on it either. You're not the first guy to screw up. You won't be the last." Travis chewed on the inside of his cheek. He was young, impulsive, but not stupid. He sensed there was more to this than I was saying, but the scent of money was stronger than his sense of self-preservation. "All right," he finally said. 15%. Silent. We shook hands. And just like that, I was in. Over the next few weeks, I became the invisible backbone of McGrady's flower shop. I used my connections with the warehouse guys and supply teams from the plant. I set up a deal with a local event planner, then another with a country club that needed weekly floral arrangements. Business boomed. Travis looked like a genius, and he soaked up the attention. He even started wearing better shirts, growing a little cockier each time I saw him. But he never questioned where the business came from. And he certainly never mentioned Emily. I watched from the shadows, kept my name off everything. Let him build the illusion. Meanwhile, I went through the motions at home. I moved into the guest room without a word. Emily didn't protest. She seemed uncomfortable around me, like she wasn't sure which version of me she'd be dealing with, angry, heartbroken, or indifferent. She didn't know this version. She didn't know quiet revenge. She still wore the tank top I saw her in that night. I think she didn't realize, or maybe she did. Maybe she thought wearing it would make me forget what she did. But I didn't forget. I remembered every detail. Every sound. Every petal crushed on the kitchen floor. One night, she looked at me from across the hall as I passed by. "You've been working late a lot." "Yeah," I said without stopping. "Business is growing." She didn't ask what kind. And I didn't tell her. The best revenge is the kind they never see coming. And I was just getting started. 3 months passed. McGrady's was thriving. They opened a second register. Hired a part-time delivery driver. Even had their first sponsored pop-up booth at a wedding expo. Travis soaked up the praise, flashing his smug little grin every time someone called him a rising star in local business. He didn't realize the foundation he stood on was built by me. That's the thing about flowers, they can bloom in poisoned soil for a while. But eventually, the roots catch the sickness. And then things fall apart. It started with a phone call. I was at work when my cell buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Jason?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yeah." "Who's this?" "This is Rachel. I'm Travis's ex. We used to work together at McGrady's." I froze. "Okay. He doesn't know I'm calling you. And I probably shouldn't. But I figured you deserved to know. Travis has been talking about selling the shop. Says he got a cash offer from a florist chain out of state." My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah. He's telling people he built the whole thing up himself and now he wants out while the price is high. I overheard him on the phone with a broker last week. He's got meetings lined up." I gripped the edge of the table. "Why are you telling me this?" She hesitated. "Because he didn't build that place alone. I remember when you came in. I saw the deals you brought in. I know how much work you did behind the scenes. And because I know he's been sleeping with your wife again." Silence. Heavy, dense silence. It pressed against my chest like a cinder block. "Are you sure?" I said quietly. "I caught them together. The night before I quit. In the back of the shop." The room tilted. The walls seemed to move. "Thank you," I said, barely able to force the words out. Rachel sighed. "I hope you burn them both down." She hung up. I sat in my truck for an hour, engine running, mind racing. So it hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been a moment of weakness. They'd never stopped. They just got better at hiding. That night, I didn't go home. I went to the flower shop. The lights were off, but I had a key. I let myself in quietly and walked through the empty showroom. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and deceit. I opened the office door and sat at the desk. Then I pulled out the files I'd been keeping, contracts, emails, invoices. All of it carefully documented with my name nowhere visible, yet tied to every major business move the shop had made. I slid them into a folder marked Contingency. Then I opened the hidden folder on my phone. Screenshots of messages Emily thought she deleted. GPS data synced from her car. Bank transfers Travis thought no one could trace. I sent the entire package to the local news blog, the one always hungry for scandal. Then I emailed the documents to the florist chain Travis was courting. In the body of the email, I wrote, "Before you finalize the deal, you should know who actually built the business you're buying. And who tried to sell it behind their partner's back. Warmest regards. The guy who bought the roses." The fallout came fast. The blog post went viral in our small town way, shared on Facebook by church ladies, whispered about at barbershops, and dissected at gas station counters over lukewarm coffee. Flower King or Fraud? The title practically stuck to Travis's forehead like a scarlet letter. By Friday, the second florist chain, one he was supposedly in talks with, pulled out. Their email was cold, short, and surgical: "We will not be proceeding. We do not support dishonest business practices." The cherry on top? His name was blacklisted from the local wedding planner's referral list. Rachel had seen to that. She knew everyone in that circle. Travis tried to reach me. Texts. Calls. A long, rambling voicemail about miscommunication, about just trying to survive, and how business is business. I didn't respond. The man who stole my trust, my dignity, and my wife's loyalty was now crumbling in the same place where he had once stood smugly with scissors and satin ribbons. Emily didn't speak to me for 2 full days after the blog post dropped. When she finally did, she was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, her eyes hollow. "You ruined his life," she said. I looked up from my coffee, calm as a man folding a paper napkin. "No," I replied. "He ruined his own. I just shined a light on it." She didn't argue. Maybe because she knew deep down that it was true. "What do you want from me, Jason?" she finally whispered. "Punishment? Shame? Do you want me to beg?" "I wanted honesty," I said. "A kitchen that didn't feel like a crime scene. A life where I wasn't the fool in his own home." She looked down, and I thought I saw regret flicker in her expression, just for a moment. But I'd learned to stop trusting brief storms of emotion. Especially from her. "Why him?" I asked. The question had lingered in my throat for months, rotting like fruit never picked. She shook her head. "I don't know. He made me feel seen. You were always working. Always tired. You were good. Too good. And I don't know how to exist with someone who doesn't need fixing." That hit me. Not because it hurt, but because it revealed everything I needed to know. Emily didn't want a partner. She wanted a project. And I was never broken enough for her. The next morning, I left her a note on the kitchen counter. It read, "The guest room is yours now. I'm moving out. The lease is in my name. You've got 30 days to find a new place. If you need help with rent, ask Travis. If he still has a job." I dropped the key on top of it. Didn't even wait to see her reaction. I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment above a mechanic's shop on Route 7. It wasn't fancy. The walls creaked, and the shower water never quite got hot enough. But it was mine. Quiet. Clean. No lies in the wallpaper. I started taking night classes in accounting, too. Something to occupy the mind and sharpen the tools. I was good with numbers. Turns out building a fake empire for a flower shop teaches you things. Some nights, I'd see Rachel at the diner near the freeway. We didn't talk much at first, just exchanged glances and maybe a half smile. But eventually, she slid into my booth with a coffee of her own. "I always hated lilies," she said one night. "Same," I replied. "They smell like funerals." She grinned. We didn't talk about Emily or Travis again. Not that night. Not ever. But sometimes, when I walked past the discount flower bins outside grocery stores, I'd still pause. Still think about the 101 roses. The way they curled at the edges, red fading into black. Love doesn't die all at once. It wilts. Petal by petal. And sometimes, that's the slowest kind of death there is. But me? I was finally learning how to grow again. And this time, it was from the roots up. A month passed. Emily was gone. She moved out 2 days before the 30-day deadline I gave her, leaving the guest room stripped clean and the kitchen strangely sterile. No notes. No farewell. Just absence. The house no longer felt haunted, it felt hollow, like a shell that once held a heartbeat. I walked through it one last time, shutting off lights, brushing my fingertips over walls we once painted together. Then I locked the door, left the key with the landlord, and never looked back. The apartment above the mechanic's shop wasn't much, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: peace. Rachel and I talked more now. Not in a romantic way, not yet. Just two people who understood that betrayal leaves a scar deeper than most can see. She'd been lied to, cheated on, tossed aside. So had I. There's a quiet comfort in shared survival. One evening, we sat on the hood of her car outside the diner, watching the sun slip behind a row of tired pine trees. "You ever think you'll trust someone again?" she asked, sipping her milkshake. "I don't know," I answered. "Maybe. Not in the same way, though." She nodded. "It's like, part of you dies." "No," I said. "It doesn't die. It changes. Trust grows back differently. Thicker. Wiser." She gave me a sideways look. "You sound like someone who still believes people can change." "Some people," I said. "Not all." She smiled faintly. "I'll take that." Meanwhile, McGrady's flower shop officially went under. Turns out Travis had racked up more debt than anyone knew. A few big events cancelled. Word spread fast. The local wedding planner community turned their backs on him. The bank foreclosed on the lease. One day, a handwritten sign appeared on the door. "Closed until further notice." But it never reopened. I passed it one morning, window display half empty, brown leaves curled up in the pots. A layer of dust coated the glass. Someone had written in the foggy condensation. What happened? I could have answered that in 1,000 ways. Instead, I walked away. One night, a letter arrived at my new apartment. No return address. No signature. Just my name on the front in handwriting I recognized, Emily's. Inside was a folded piece of paper and one photograph. The photo was of her and Travis, some kind of vacation shot, probably taken before the scandal broke. They were standing under a palm tree. His arm was around her waist. She was smiling, eyes closed, blissful. On the back, she'd written 5 words. "We're not together anymore." I stared at it for a long while. Then I set it down on the table, lit a match, and watched it burn in a chipped ceramic bowl next to my unopened mail. Some things didn't deserve a reply. That weekend, Rachel and I went hiking. Nothing fancy, just a trail north of town where the trees grew thick and the creek ran low. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her dream of opening a cafe that doubled as a second-hand bookstore. I told her about my new accounting classes and how I was thinking of starting my own business, no partners this time. Halfway up the trail, she stopped and pointed to a wild patch of flowers growing in the shade of a crumbling rock wall. "Look at that," she said. "They're blooming in the dark." I crouched down, touching one gently. "They don't need sunlight all the time," I said. "Just space to grow." She looked at me, long and steady. "You think that's what we are?" I met her gaze. "Not yet. But maybe we could be." And for the first time since everything fell apart, the thought didn't terrify me. It felt real. Rachel and I didn't become a couple, not officially, not immediately. We just existed near each other. A quiet companionship. Sometimes I'd drop off pastries from a bakery on her porch. Sometimes she'd bring me gas station coffee and sarcasm. We never tried to define what we were, and somehow, that was the most honest thing either of us had ever done. Weeks passed. Then months. I finished my accounting courses and registered a small business, Petal Ledger and Company. I thought the name was fitting, a nod to the past, but rooted in growth. I offered bookkeeping and consulting to local businesses, starting with a bakery, then a photography studio, then a few boutique shops that remembered how I'd helped McGrady's bloom, before it withered. Word spread. So did the money. But more importantly, so did the peace. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, a package arrived. No label. No return address. Inside, a small lockbox, old and brass. Not rusted, but aged. Like it had been waiting. And a note. Jason. You were always smarter than me. You probably knew this day would come. Inside is something I never showed anyone, not even Emily. It's everything. I didn't have the courage to use it, but I think you do. Don't let them forget me. Rachel. I turned the key. The lid creaked open. Inside were dozens of documents, ledgers, receipts, photocopies of Travis's secret ledgers. Hidden transactions. Double books. A secret PayPal account registered to a shell name. He had embezzled over $30,000 from McGrady's, possibly more, some of it even during the time he was trying to sell the business. There were also old text message screenshots. Conversations between Travis and Emily. Dark ones. Not just about cheating. About me. One message made my stomach freeze. Travis, if he ever finds out, will say he's unstable. Make him look crazy. Emily, he's too quiet. I think he knows already. Travis, then maybe he needs to go. Quietly. I sat still for what felt like an hour. It wasn't just betrayal. It had been a plan. I was never supposed to win. I brought the contents to my lawyer the next morning. By that evening, an anonymous tip landed on the desk of a local detective with jurisdiction over financial fraud. Travis was arrested 3 days later in a town 2 states away. He was working under a fake name in a strip mall floral kiosk. When the police raided his motel room, they found 3 IDs and a briefcase of cash. But that wasn't the surprise. The real surprise came 2 weeks later. I got a call from the detective. Mr. Hart? Speaking. You might want to come down to the station. We recovered some emails from Travis's old laptop. One of them appears to be addressed to you, but never sent. Okay, I said, confused. What's it about? It's a confession, the detective said. And it names someone else as a co-conspirator. I drove there immediately. They handed me a printed copy. On the first page, written in Travis's distinct, sloppy typing, were the words. He was supposed to drink the tea. The letter detailed how, on the day I had brought Emily those 101 roses, the day I caught them in the kitchen, she and Travis had planned for me to walk in, drink the cup of tea she'd left on the counter, and pass out. They would make it look like stress or exhaustion. And then, they were going to stage a break-in. Let the tea finish the job. It hadn't worked because I never touched it. Too excited. Too distracted by the roses. Too in love to sip a cup. The letter ended with, I backed out. Emily didn't. She still has the stuff. I kept quiet. I'm not proud. I stared at the paper. Stared through it. Then I laughed. Not out of humor. Out of disbelief. Out of a bone-deep relief that I had trusted my gut. That I had survived. Out of the sheer absurdity that the flowers she always begged for almost became the symbol of my death. Emily was arrested the next day. The compound found in her closet matched what was described in Travis's unsent email. Enough to sedate someone permanently if mixed properly. She swore it was, just for protection, but the DA wasn't buying it. Rachel showed up at my door that night. I didn't know it went that deep, she said quietly. Neither did I said. We sat in silence. She looked at me, brow furrowed. Do you regret any of it? I thought for a moment. Then I shook my head. No, I said. Because from it all, something real grew. She smiled. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled back, freely. Epilogue. A year later, Petal Ledger and Company opened its first office downtown. I planted roses outside the door, 101 of them. Not for Emily. For me. To remind myself what love is supposed to look like, earned, not begged for. Rachel's cafe/bookshop opened across the street. Sometimes she brings me tea. And every single time, I make sure to brew it myself. The end.